First protocol then, Shaughn, do you want to give us an introduction to who you are and a brief background of your working career so far?
Yeah, so far, yes. So I started in medicine in Cardiff a long time ago, and I worked in many different places. And I've always pursued a very clinical with patients and an academic approach. And so the patients I saw were obstetrics, labour ward, pregnancy, and also gynecology, including hormones and surgery. So that's basically what I've done in a clinical way over the years. Academic, I've always pursued an academic career with an aim of wanting to be a professor from a very early stage. And so I did lecturer's posts, senior lecturer's posts, and then most recently in London, I was consultant to the Royal Free, and then I was a senior lecturer of University of London there, and then I moved to Keele University over 30 years ago now to become a consultant there and to become the first professor of obstetrics and gynecology of Keele Medical School. And my clinical work has basically centered more and more recently on hormones, the effects of too many hormones, too little hormones, and so forth.
Fantastic. Paula, we obviously know who you are, but do you want to introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't?
Yeah, I'm a consultant in sexual and reproductive health based at Liverpool Women's Hospital. I've had a kind of funny career in that I was a GP for about 20 years, and then I transferred to sexual and reproductive health, and I've moved to Liverpool Women's really to pursue my research interests, which also relate to female hormones. And I got to know Shaughn when we were involved in a study looking for a drug to treat PMDD.
Fantastic. And we're here to talk about the book that you've co-written, which is Hair Hormones, a book for men. Firstly then, Shaughn, how did the book come about?
Well, if I'm being totally honest, I've been trying to write it for about 15 years. My kids said, is that the book you started writing 15 years or more years ago when we were in Provence and you got up every morning? And so it progressed to about first draft 2/3 of the way through. And I eventually thought I was going to get there, but meeting Paula through the research study we were doing, she challenged me to finish it. We finished it between us. She added lots of stuff to it, and it eventually got released. What was it, 3 days ago?
Yeah.
Yep.
And Paula, there's a section in the preface of the front of the book where it's written that the book is exclusively for men. It concerns the influences of hormones on women and, importantly, all the secondary influences on men. Why was it so important to you to direct this book specifically at men?
I think, to be honest, that was probably more Shaughn's idea, but I think it's a really good idea. So lots of books and lots of articles are directed towards women, but there is really very little out there for men, and men are influenced by female hormones. So I think we thought there was nothing, but I've had a look, and there seem to be one or two books. But I think the way this book's been written is easy to read, and so coming out now just before Christmas, it would be a great idea if there was one in every man's stocking, because I think it is important that men and women understand their reproductive system and the influence that hormones, as Shaughn said, too many or too little can impact on quality of life of everyone.
Yeah, I kind of just add to that. I agree with that. I agree with that fully, and we've of course discussed that. And of course, the hormones affect women, and the hormones cause disorders, and those disorders really do have an effect on men and the relationships between the two.
And what do you expect that men will, or what do you hope that men will learn from reading it, Shaughn?
Well, let's think, if they start to understand the hormones, the sort of very basics of the hormone, O-level hormones, or GCSE it's called now, isn't it? So GCSE hormones, and they understand the process, and they understand why it causes things like premenstrual dysphoric disorder, why the females symptoms are so bad for 2 weeks perhaps, and then she changes completely and she's back to normal. For men to understand that's a bit difficult unless it's explained in some detail. Then at the end of reproductive life, of course, age 45 to 55, the hormones disappear and women may have symptoms of unable to sleep, mood change, hot flushes, pulling the duvet off. And if you don't understand the syndrome or the condition, then men aren't going to be able to understand why their wives have changed, why they change from month to month, why they change at the end of their reproductive cycles. That understanding, we hope, we've never proved it, but we hope will help the two, both the man and his partner, to live together better.
I kind of think women don't realise that when they're actually experiencing those symptoms, what's going on. I think a well-informed man is more likely to notice a cyclical pattern to mood variation. I don't know whether you agree with that, Shaughn, but I think patients often come with a partner who's been very much aware of what's going on.
Yeah, well, that was a question I was going to ask. From your experience, then, from obviously seeing, you know, probably hundreds, thousands of women over your career in clinics, what is the kind of impact of the non-understanding? So what kind of things come out of maybe patients feeling as though the men in their life don't understand the changes that they're going through?
Divorce, murder. Really extreme things can occur. But yeah, I think relationship breakdown, not being able to continue working or not being productive at work or only being productive part of the month. So fairly catastrophic effect potentially on everyone's quality of life, lifestyle, not just the person who's suffering.
And their sexual relationship as well, of course, you know, either with the hormone cycle or particularly as the menopause approaches and after menopause.
So as I mentioned before, and I'm obviously non-clinical, I would, you know, I refer to myself as a lay person, so to speak. And hormones feel like a topic that I'm aware of, but I don't really know an enormous amount about. And I presume there'll probably be men who will be listening and watching who probably feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
So, in a kind of broad way, could you, Shaughn, give me one example of how hormones impact on a female's life on a daily basis?
Yeah. Okay. Let's take the PMDD one. PMDD's become quite popular now. You know what I mean? It's in the media and so forth, and it stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So that means a premenstrual mood disorder. And it is the same as premenstrual syndrome, but it's an extreme psychological end of the spectrum. And that comes about in this way. So a woman has period, then she produces one of the hormones called estrogen, and that's produced throughout the cycle. Then on day 14 or thereabouts, ovulation occurs, so the egg is released. And what happens then is that ovary then starts to produce a hormone called progesterone. And that progesterone goes to part of the brain and stimulates the brain to cause a huge wide range of symptoms, ranging from mood change, mood swings, depression, aggression, suicidal thoughts. And they, of course, and they will hate their husband within all of that. And the husband finds it very difficult to respond to that until the whole thing is explained to him by this book, and he will not cure it in that way, but he will be able to take part in considering how it's managed and not giving advice as such, but giving his opinion with the woman. So let's say it's so bad that she needs to have her ovaries and her uterus out. Then he can be involved with her in that decision with a really good understanding of what's going on.
One of the other questions then that would come on the back of that would be, and Paul, and I don't really, I suppose, going on the back of saying that I don't know an enormous about hormones, that would be probably both my own as well as women's hormones as well. In terms of for men who are listening, for them to get a better understanding of kind of the day-to-day impact, what kind of impact can hormones have on men on a daily basis as well?
So we didn't really cover male hormones. It's a book about female hormones for men. That's another book.
Actually, the opening line of the book does mention the effects of male hormones, saying that it's sort of setting the scene for hormones generally. I think if I won't get the wording exactly right, but it's something like, it's well known that male hormones, cause war, rape, and so forth. And so they do have an impact on testosterone. Is another hormone. Testosterone is produced by the testis, and it's also produced by the ovary. And in both the male and the female, testosterone is responsible for sex drive. And so if men have a condition where there's no testosterone, that'll disappear. In women who go to them, because there's quite a lot of testosterone produced by women, and if women lose their testosterone, then their sex drive disappears. If men lose testosterone, their sex drive disappears. Both can be replaced, can be replaced for men, can be replaced for women. The key thing is, I think men don't have a monthly cycle. They may have a 3-monthly cycle, but they don't have, and it's not so dramatic. So probably their response to hormones is all of the time. Either they have a lot or they don't have much. Whereas with a woman, it's 2-week phases over the, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off over the month. So men don't have that same sort of issue.
And then, of course, post-menopause, they dwindle altogether, both estrogen and testosterone. And hormone replacement therapy for women includes using testosterone once women have had enough estrogen on board to make sure that's not going to make them better on its own. I think we say in the book that male hormones make men smell on more than one occasion.
I did put that in, yes. What was I going to say then? No, it might come back to me. I think I wrap it out.
There's a sentence at the start of chapter 1 that says, to most men, understanding female hormones might seem an impossible and daunting task. And one thing that's obviously become quite apparent over numerous studies is that men generally are quite poor at engaging with health and understanding health.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the motivating factors for the book, I presume, was to try and encourage men to engage better with their partner's health and therefore health in general.
Exactly. I think, I couldn't expand on that anymore. I think that's exactly it. That's why, going back to Paula's Christmas stocking tongue-in-cheek statement, that for a woman to give that to her husband might be the initiation of a very big change in their relationship.
And I suppose I would imagine that I can almost hear the protestations of some men being told or being given such a book or being recommended such a book. Paul, that if you were kind of having to convince somebody to read it, or given, they said, give me a reason why I should read it, how would you kind of talk them around?
Well, I would say it's easy to digest information, but if they don't want the information about health, there's some really lovely pictures of Shaughn's sculptures. I think it's quite a quirky book. I did my editing in the back of a camper van going around Europe, so it'll always stick in my head where that book kind of finally got finished. We were competing, I think, with each other to get it all done as quickly as possible, which after 15 years was probably a good thing.
Yeah, we were competing actually to see who could get the drafts back most quickly and most accurately. Oh, there's one thing Paula hasn't told you, and that all of her offspring and family are male except for one, and they're all getting their book for Christmas.
Yeah, I thought that might be part of the process.
Yeah, it's an easy option. Everyone gets the same Christmas present.
And equally, as we just said, you've encouraged, again at the start of the book, encourage women to give it to the men in their life to read. I suppose one of the things that goes along with this is opening up those lines of communication between couples, between friends, and between family when discussing health. Was that also a motivating factor for both of you to be involved in the book?
Yeah, we don't think it'll initiate problems. Do you know what I mean? So it's my hormones. You better read this book. We don't think it'll do that. I think it does it in a fairly gentle, scientific way for the you know, it's the same as if you read an article on hormones in the Times or something like that. I guess it's that sort of level. There's a few jokes in it. Such as chapter 4, where we say, gosh, the last couple of chapters were fairly hard going. You can have this chapter off. Not quite like that, but that sort of aim. So it's intended to have some light-hearted stuff in it as well, some good science and some good emotional stuff.
And through the process of writing it, I mean, for Shaughn, you've mentioned it's been a 15-year process on and off. Paula, not quite so long. But have either of you learned anything through the process of writing the book, either personally or professionally? Shaughn, I'll start with you. Obviously, it's been
collaboration is pretty important. My first book was a textbook for the medical profession, and that was a monograph which I wrote entirely by myself. And that was the first one. By the time you get to book number whatever I've done, it's not an easy process. You know, you think at least this one was different. It wasn't a medical book. At least this one was for the lay public, and so I have a different attitude towards it. What have I learned? Collaboration. Got to keep going. Don't spend 15 years doing it. Oh, there is an advantage, of course. If I'd finished it 15 years ago, it would have been me by myself, so I wouldn't have collaborated with Paula. And also, it would be quite out of date by now, wouldn't it? It wouldn't have PMDD in there, because that's only become recognised much more recently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think when you're writing a book for the lay public, you have to obviously explain things in a way which is understandable. And for me, it's made a difference to how I explain the various conditions that we talk about to patients. And I think that's important. I think we can overcomplicate things as doctors. So I think it's been a positive thing for me from that point of view.
Do you think that's because there seems to be more and more these kind of the advent of, be it pieces of writing or videos or podcasts or whatever it might be, that are more about connecting clinicians with their patients on subjects that may be a little bit more uncomfortable for people to talk about. And that, as you say there, Paul, I think it's about making information approachable and accessible for people. How important or how difficult is that kind of bridge to cross for clinicians and for patients? And do you think it's something that you're getting better at?
Maybe I don't have the insight, but I've never felt difficulty in communicating with women or their partners while you're with them. I mean, as you were talking then, various couples were popping into my mind, thinking of how, I think this was perhaps the stimulus, now you mention it, how some men's lives seem to be transformed by the process of consulting in the consulting room. And I think that just could have been the initiation.
And I suppose then, looking back on the process of writing the book, you had to pick one part of it that was your favourite part, the most memorable part for you. Which part of the book would it be?
The last chapter.
We might, because that was the end.
Yeah.
I think the favourite part was choosing the cover. That caused a lot of aggro because
there was a lot of trouble with that, wasn't there? Yeah. I think. I mean, we covered most hormonal things. Covered PMS, PMDD, which are more or less the same thing. Menstrual disorders from the bleeding point of view. We covered polycystic ovaries, polycystic ovary syndrome. Covered endometriosis and
menopause.
So that's virtually everything that's related to it. The one I think, well, the thing that I've studied quite extensively over my career has been premenstrual syndrome, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So I think that's pretty much it, really. The cover was interesting because it's a sculpture I did in one of my first bronzes, and we both wanted to have that on there, and then we got quite a good professional photographer to film it, and he put some red swoopy things on it, which we've decided in retrospect are the hormones circulating around the woman. Yeah, so we're pretending we intended that.
Well, that's what Paul mentioned it before. That's one of the interesting elements of the book is the sculptures that go through it. Is that something you've done for a long time, John? Is that something you've always done?
So let me just think, how do I answer that? I started doing a few sculpture courses 6-7 years ago. And then as I came to the end of my medical career, I was ending up doing 2 days a week, 1 day a week. And then that overlapped with me going to a sculpture school called the Heatherley School of Fine Art in London to do a diploma. And I've done 5 terms and another term to do. COVID's messed it up a bit. But, and so I've done quite a few sculptures, and I've now just bought a place in Oxford where I've got a barn, which is going to be my sculpture studio. And I hasten to add that I currently have a sculpture in the Royal Academy summer exhibition. I find it difficult not to mention that.
I think you should. Get it in there, Shaughn. Let the people know. Why do you think it was important to... Obviously, there's quite a few examples throughout the book of those pieces of work. What was the thought process around putting those in?
Well, yes, okay. So there's the thinking of the ones that are there. They're predominantly women. There's a photograph which I took as I came out of the members' room of Tate Modern. They got this big glass thing there, and there were 2 people talking. So I used that one, that people should communicate. I've got one where I've got some men's heads stacked, and that's confusion in men. And it finishes with, well, I think they're the particular examples of how I've tried to make them relevant to the book. They're nearly all female.
What about the female anatomy?
I've got female anatomy of we had a live model in the studio, and we had to do a half life-size model. So she's towards the back of the book, and the back of her is towards the back of the book, in fact.
I was thinking more of chapter 2.
Give me a clue.
The shard.
Oh, the shard. Yes, that's ceramic, and people kept coming up to me in this. I did it in the art studio. People coming up to me and said, "That's a bit phallic, isn't it?" And I twisted it because it was a bit boring. So I twisted it, and then you have to look at that particular one and see how it can be both male and female reproductive organs at the same time. If you don't twig straight away, you can send me an email.
Fantastic. So you mentioned it before, Shaughn. Where can people buy the book? Where can they get the book?
Well, if you Google Amazon, Briggs, and O'Brien, and you've got them. And if you put in her hormones, it's important not to have a gap between her and hormones, because we wanted to make it her hormones, one word. It does have an inhibition of searching, which is a shame because we hadn't realized that. But search for hormones, Amazon, and you'll actually see all of my books, all of Paula's books, and this one will stand out as being the one with the hormones going around the sculpture. And you can get everything more. It's on Waterstone's website, it's on W.H. Smith, and it's on a few things that I haven't heard of before. So they're the main ones that everybody knows. Yeah.
Fantastic, and we'll obviously put some links up and direct people on where they can find the book. I'm out of questions, guys. I don't know if you've got anything else that you wanted to add to the listeners for.
No. It was. I tell you, it was fun writing it. My only regret is we can't have a party launch because of COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend who's launching a book at the moment, and he's in the same position. He had a bit of a book tour kind of penciled in, and it all got binned off. So not particularly happy. But I told him there, I said, you can do a little Zoom one or something, it'll be fine. That's the thing.
This is our launch.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you both for answering the questions today, and I'm sure people will enjoy reading the book and getting through it. And I think, just to be honest with you, what I find about it is it's another one of those things where whatever people take from it, it can only be a good thing in terms of learning about, without needing to learn the ins and outs of the science side of it, just understanding how those things can affect people's lives on a daily basis. I think it's really important. So Shaughn and Paula, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.